Because at the end of the day, if you think about seafood, you don't have, you don't know when the next product's coming, so it's quite a difficult thing. It's quite different to what Michelle does with bread stuff and things like that. You actually know what you're actually dealing with. So it was quite a challenge, and it taught me a lot of things. But subsequent to that, in dealing with, in terms of marketing has been my specialty in my area, but increasingly I realised I was actually in the innovation space. And innovation has become very much an overused word. But hopefully today I'll just give you some real tidbits about what innovation really is about. And that ultimately you can learn the techniques to improve your business and seriously make a difference. And at the end of the day, when you look at, I've just, yesterday I was up at the Hunter, and I've been working with mining services companies. So you can imagine what their, what the recipe for mining services is at the moment is quite tough. And those that have invested in innovation, and some of the companies I'm working with, like Headwell, are doing very well compared to a lot of the others. And the secret, and I've been working with the food area quite a bit on the Central Coast, is the amount of investment in their research and development. And people don't really understand what that's about. So hopefully I'll give you a little bit of a taste of that. So I titled this Finding the Innovation Champion Within, and we're a little bit over the score there, so hopefully that'll come out a little bit better.
Can you
fix that up for me if they can? Yeah, okay. I work with, I'm obviously from the University of Newcastle, that's one thing, but UON Central Coast is what it's called, so at the Central Coast campus here. So as Sue was indicating, I've spent about 12 years teaching students here, some of which are right in front of me, previous students. So teaching them about all things about marketing strategy, innovation and aspects like that. And that's been a real, I think one of the things I was driving around yesterday, I was actually up at Somersby, and we're actually looking at that location and looking at what we could do with that location and looking at the areas. And I was going past the Rimba, and I've realised of recent times how deep our heritage and Indigenous and Aboriginal heritage is here. And I think we take a lot of things for granted on the Central Coast and the lifestyle, so it really is a privilege. And I don't take anything for granted. And working in front of you guys here a few years ago, I used to represent the uni at Erina Chamber, so it is a real privilege to be able to give some insights. So what is an innovation champion? What's innovation about? And how do we actually harness this to do better in our own companies? So what I was going to talk about today is really what we're focused on, which is what we call the innovation champion. And often there's two types of champions. There's the CEO, potentially, okay, you want innovation champions at the CEO level, leadership level. And the other one, and these are the people who are often forgotten, and they're the people within your organisation that are trying to push the message and the innovation up through the organisation. Those people have the hardest job pretty well in life. They're what I call, the actual concept of innovation comes from a word, it comes from a famous French philosopher who talked about counter-imitation. So innovation is actually the opposite of imitation. And what do we as humans do very well? We imitate each other, okay? We follow fashions, we do things that are, where we get, we've got a little pride, ego, and we like to feel good about ourselves. So we actually follow each other, and we follow fashion, and so often we're actually quite good at imitating and doing what other people do. They call it memes and things like that when you actually imitate aspects that you see of other people. Language is the same, so we imitate language because that's a great way to communicate. Counter-imitation is actually innovation. Now, that's the hardest thing to do because you have to go against the grain. So actually finding people that are actually prepared to go against what is normal and take risks is really difficult. Now, the trouble is we don't often spend enough time nurturing our risk takers. We actually often reward people that imitate. So So that's why innovation and innovation champions is what I want to talk about. I actually, in Sam's down here, we work on Innovate Central, which is a strategy for the region, which is all the universities being involved with the region, Graham Baker, Enterprise Connect, actually trying to improve the innovation capacity of the region. One of the things that we're very excited about, and Bob was there the other day, Bob Ward, we launched the Innovate Central Music and competition for musicians on the Central Coast. People like David Bacon and myself, about 8 or 9 years ago, realised that we had such huge music talent on the Central Coast. Imagine if we could nurture it, and how important arts is to innovation on the region. So we're doing quite a few things. I just thought I'd show you that that's where we're coming from. So having the right people in the right place is really our challenge, and nurturing these people that are actually going to take risks and counter-imitators. That's what I want to talk about today. So innovation champions who can see what others don't, you know, the things that you're not seeing often, right? A lot of people in the room will be innovation champions, but there are people in the room that that's not their cup of tea. So they're the ones that are going to come and say to you, well, why don't we do it this way? And then you're the sort of, you know, then maybe a lot of people are resistant, so they'll say, well, we've always done it this way. Why don't we keep doing it this way? Well, we call that creative destruction. That's when other companies come in and wipe you out. So if you're actually not changing, we've got a problem. So what is innovation and innovation champions? I've given you an insight there while we were getting it fixed up. So I've come up with a new formula for innovation, just to make it quite simple so that people actually understand what innovation is. So we often get scared of the word research, and it's a dirty word. If you're, universities, that's what we do. We do research, okay? But it's not the sort of word now that I use very publicly, because it actually often scares people. They think, oh, what's this thing, research? It sounds like you're a boffin or somebody over here or something like that. But in actual fact, research can be many things. And I've just been to Germany and looked at their research capacity, and what I've realised the difference. I've realised why Australians are better than the Germans in some things, and I've realised why the Germans are better than us in other things. And one of the key things is our idea generation. We are the great tinkerers, okay? We're the great people that will find a solution to something that's pretty hard to work out and come up with something to it, right? That's often what I call tinkering, okay? We come up with little ideas and we see things and we say, gee, I wish we could do that better. Used to work in aquaculture. The aquaculture farmers were brilliant at it. They'd see a problem and they'd say, if we put those two pipes together, we'll be able to solve the problem. And they'd come up with an innovation, okay, potentially. But that was only one part of the innovation. That was actually what I call the research part, the tinkering part. The Germans do it differently. They build big groups. That table there, they probably have a table of people doing that sort of research. So they often do research in groups, and they're all focused on the problem. So that's how they do research. But it's the same thing. Most of you people are doing research every day, trying to solve problems, okay? Talk about development, research and development. So the next phase is, how do we develop something? We get an idea, we see that there's a problem, we need to solve it. Then how do we develop the item to actually go forward and take it to the next level? That's where the Germans are really specialists and very good at development. That's where we're not so good, okay? The one that we're worst at is commercialisation. Now, the Chinese are good at commercialisation and other countries like that. Now, what I said to a group of engineers yesterday, we need to get better at actually using the Chinese market for our commercialisation. Because what I learned from Germany is they're surrounded by all these different countries. That's why we've got such a big market and potential. We're surrounded by the sea, so it's not easy to commercialise. So that formula there is really what innovation's about. And it's been highlighted, I think Booz and Co talk about the difference between the top R&D companies in the world and the top innovators in the world. And the top innovators actually commercialise. So, essentially, when I train people in this field, I talk about the rules of the game. What's the turf you're in? What are the things? And I think David Caneen did a few triple somersaults and handstands and delivered to this group a while back. And he's all about rapid, discontinuous, volatile change. And I agree with David wholeheartedly. So many things happening nowadays around us that too many people are focused in the firm and not worried about what's going on outside the firm. It's actually the outside that's killing the leaders of the businesses. It's not what's going on inside. But at the end of the day, I call that the rules of the game. You've got to understand the terrain, the turf that you're working with to actually solve it and to be able to innovate in it. What I train people to do is I train them either to play to win or play not to lose, depending on the circumstances running around them. Some of the, last week I was up in the Hunter, one of the key players up there said to me, Anton, we're just definitely playing not to lose at the moment. We've got to survive. We can't play to win at the moment, okay? So depending on what's going on around you, you've got to make those choices. What I'm going to show you in a minute is how you actually play to win on a more regular basis. So I actually use the metaphor of laying your bets, but I don't want it to be seen as that it's a gamble, okay? Innovation is not a gamble. Innovation is planned. Innovation can be chance, if you want it to be chance and a risk, but if you're good at it, it doesn't have to be risky. So I've said you calculate to minimise your risk. The good operators don't take serious risk. They are very calculated about winning these bets. So the thing is, you've got to actually work out what bets you've laid and how you're going to go about that. I actually teach this in my strategy class, so that's but I'm actually writing this book as well. But the thing is that there's two sides there, newness to market and newness to the enterprise. Ultimately, that's about all you can do with your business. I keep it more simple to my students. I say there's only two things in business you can do. I could ask one of them here, but she may not be able to answer that. She probably can. There's two things in a business you can do. Does anybody want to volunteer what they are? It's pretty simple when you think about this. Keep the business really simple. What are the two things you can do to make a profit?
Work on your business?
Increase sales.
Different, increase sales. So that's increase revenue, minimise cost. There's only two things you can do as a business. You can minimise your cost or you can maximise your revenue. There is nothing else. Hopefully you'll do both simultaneously. And that's what I train people to do. Now, both of those can be innovation. One of them is to minimise your cost and to innovate in that direction. The other one is to actually maximise your revenue by doing something different. So up there you can see that sort of scenario. There's different options. I train people to radically innovate, and I train people to incrementally innovate. So, and part of the bets that you've got to lay is you've got to have some radical bets and you've got to have some incremental bets if you want to take on the players that are coming at you in a business. And if you're not doing that, you're out of the game, eventually. So the real key is to lay a multiple number of bets. If you play the share market, what do? Do you have a portfolio? You should have a portfolio. In fact, I'm more inclined to quite a good investor, Montgomery, who talks about the whole thing is you don't bet on the stock market. What you should do is you should invest in businesses that are on the stock market. It's quite speculation is the bet where you're betting on the stock market. When you're actually investing in the stock market, you're actually investing in businesses. I invest in businesses that I see that are doing the innovation right. So what I'm saying is innovation doesn't have to happen by chance, but a lot of people, and most people probably, are leaving it to chance. And that's the key. Why would you do that? So we've identified 8 steps that I've delivered to a group of 30 businesses on the coast now, like Sanitarium and others like that, to actually help them with changing their business. The first thing that I actually focus on, the most important thing, and the thing that I think we're forgetting, and I heard a presenter yesterday talking about this and saying that we've changed over 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 years. And actually, if you look at the line, that's how the line's gone in the last 200 years in terms of development. It was flatlining and then suddenly 200. Imagine how you've got to cope with that. That's a very difficult thing to cope with. I actually don't think we've changed that much. So what I train people to do is look at their emotional intelligence, their political intelligence, Okay? I don't care really about intelligence per se, that's not so important to me, and there's social intelligence. The most important things to do is actually improve your emotional intelligence. Because you can't do social intelligence if you don't, you can't do political intelligence. So I actually train people now to actually understand how the politics will play for their organisation, particularly if they're a champion within. They've got to actually manoeuvre and get through the system, find a sponsor, find support to actually get the innovation acted on. So they're the sort of things we look at. We look at culture. I don't deal now with, if a company's not what we call a learning organisation, I probably walk away. Because if you're not a learning organisation, there's no way possible I can teach you about innovation. So these are really important things when you think about it. This is a formula that I've used of recent times, and I've got a blog now where I promote this concept of 360 degrees of innovation. Because often we think of new innovations as product innovation. But in actual fact, that's only one small part of innovation. So up there you can see I've got leadership, organisation, HR, management, R&D, operations, systems, marketing and finance. Each one of those areas I can innovate in, and I train companies to do that. You look at the soul, and I say the soul because I think that culture of the organisation is such a key. You fail there, you fail everywhere. And then you look at that new or modified products, and that's only a small part, but it is a very important part of innovation. But these processes are just as important. The explore and exploit, I won't go into that today, but it's called the ambidextrous organisation. And that is a really important part of any organisation. There's two sides of an organisation. You have to be able to explore, find new things, then you have to have, like the Germans do, the discipline to implement and make sure that you're doing that all the time so that it gets, you get the best value out of it, the revenue out of it. But on the same token, never get locked in because you need to change. So you need to keep exploring. So certain companies I focus on their exploration, other companies I focus on their exploitation, the best companies I focus on both simultaneously. This is pretty deep actually for a lunchtime discussion, isn't it? So the next thing that I focus on is what we call the jobs to be done. Harvard's talking a lot about this now, okay? What's the job to be done? And we're going to do a little exercise in a minute, so check my time, we're going okay. But I want to do a little exercise with you guys about the job to be done. Room, okay? I'm actually now not a big advocate for brainstorming, not at all. Brainstorming is not a very good exercise. It's a great way to generate a lot of ideas, but then probably not very useful to you. Focused problem solving is the key. And, actually, what's the problem is most people don't spend enough time on actually researching and understanding the problem. They do a lot of focus on the outcome, but they actually don't think enough and spend enough time. What is the problem? What am I trying to solve here? Being a marketer, I'm market-oriented. That means I've always got the customer in my focus. I always empathise, because one of my favourite words was empathy. Understanding the customer. So if I was out there in the chamber, for example, the most important thing to me would be my customer. And my customer is the guys in the room here. They're actually paying, they're paying to actually be part of this club, or cluster, if you want to call it that. So if I wanted to add value to my customers, what's the job to be done? What is it that they want me to do that I can service them and give them value? Recently, there's a movie out with Steve Jobs, who's very famous. A lot of people misunderstand what Steve Jobs was about and stuff like that, but the one thing, and I like it now, Steve's job's to be done. He was extremely brilliant at actually what I call envisioning what had to be done. And then very focused on a few objectives and actually delivering on it. He really understood customers better than anybody else. And when he saw a customer's need, he could work it out before they actually understood it. That's why, a marketing academic, and I now tell my students, I'm not into surveys anymore. I'm not so big into surveys and all that sort of thing. I am into customer satisfaction and things like that, but not to find out what the job to be done is, because my customers often don't know what the job to be done is, unless they ask them and really dig deep to try to find out what is it that you need, what's different that I'm not doing for you. So that's the real focus. So any of your businesses should be focused on what is the job to be done. How can I improve my business, innovation? How could I be more innovative by actually satisfying that? I just thought I'd put up a couple of little examples. This one came up this morning. I didn't realise about this. I don't know how that... Zebedee, a new product by Sarah. A 3D mapping product that just basically flings like that and maps. It's mapped the Tower of Pizza. Okay, it's gone through the whole lot and mapped it like it's never been mapped before, just in the last few weeks. So they've come up with what is a really radical innovation, a new product that you can map things, right, and identify. The interesting thing about that, I was in Germany and I went to the best operator for 3D printing. People think 3D printing is a novelty or a little game or something like that. Some of the parts in that are actually being built by 3D printing. The other one, the reject shop. I'm not sure how it's going now, but up until the last couple of years, it was one of our most successful businesses in Australia. How could they be innovative? They're just doing the same thing, they're just selling it very cheaply. They've been they're innovative in the product. Remember we talked about the process? They're keeping the value down on the units, right? So they're very efficient. They've improved their efficiency and they've been able to keep low-cost products. So I thought, people might say, well, it's pretty hard to do the Cyro, thingamajig, but it's not that hard to do a reject shop thingamajig, because they do it very well. So I thought we'd do a little exercise on the tables here today. I just thought, how can we help the chamber through innovation? What is the job to be done, right? From your perspective, you as a user, right? You as a user of this service, what is it the service could do for you? If you think about my 360 degrees of innovation, for example, somebody might say, how can we improve revenue by looking at the finances and innovate in the finance area? How can we innovate in the board area, for example, or how we actually manage this process? How can we, is there new products that we could bring to market? So I thought we'd just, if you think back to that 360, I thought we'd just spend 5 minutes on each table just having to think of a few ideas. If we wanted to improve this chamber, what innovations could we come up with that actually would make the chamber a more successful chamber? And I thought it would be most useful for a chamber to do that. So I'll give you 5 minutes on your table just to discuss and think about new innovations that you might actually do here. Remembering back to, there's plenty of room for innovation in the 360 framework that I've delivered there. So we'll just spend time doing that for a few minutes. And then we'll see what you can come up with.